Disclaimer. Judge Ron Rangel is providing this podcast and website for educational purposes only, as well as to give the public general information regarding topics related to the criminal justice system. The views, thoughts, and opinions of his guest speakers are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Judge Rangel. You are now listening to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel.
Welcome to Beyond the Gavel with Judge Ron Rangel. I'm your host. It's been a while since you've heard from me. Now, there's some changes that have come about as a result of us doing this podcast. I know you've heard me on the airwaves. You've thought, man, what a wonderful podcast to listen to. Now you have an opportunity to watch us, to view us as we're now videotaping these episodes. It wasn't my idea. The idea is you got to go into the fold, you got to be forward thinking, you got to move with technology. As I go about in the community, folks ask me all the time, Ron, why can't we see the video of you on these podcasts? Now, frankly, I said, because you can't, and I really don't know otherwise. And so I didn't necessarily think much of it. But of course, Alana, who's the forward thinking of the two of us, came forward and said, this is what we're going to do today. So here we are. We are video recording. And I hope as a result of it, the listeners, you, the listener, have an opportunity to enjoy this podcast as much as you can. This is episode 58, entitled Mental Health and the Legal Profession. It's been a while since you've heard from me. And during this episode, you may hear me cough. I'm going to explain to you what it is that has happened to me the last few months. So we did have some podcast interviews, prepared as it relates to scheduling them, and folks were going to come in. Tom, I think you were one of them. You were going to come in, and at some particular point we had to reschedule. I ended up getting the flu a few months back, so I got the flu. It hit me pretty hard. The flu has never really hit me that kind of hard, but it did hit me pretty hard. Put me out of commission for over a week, and as soon as I was just about recovered from the flu, I got COVID. And this is the second time I've gotten the COVID virus. This COVID is one of those long-lasting, lingering. It's been a couple of months since I had that particular virus, and I'm still coughing as a result of it. It's still one of these long-time coughs, which leads into other issues. So anyway, I was going through COVID, and as soon as I was recovering from that, other than the cough, I got hit with the third virus that's been going around here in the courthouse, which is causing folks to get ill. So I ended up going to the clinic, and she said, Ron, you just haven't been lucky as it relates to these types of things. And here we are a couple of months later. I'm glad to be back. I don't want you, the listener, to have any sort of fear as to whether or not we're going to continue these podcast episodes. I want you to know we got several more that are scheduled. We're looking forward to those interviews. We're having a great time doing this. I really, really appreciate Alana for being patient with me and doing everything related to the production and everything else. All I am here is the voice. She is everything else behind the podcast, Beyond the Gavel. So thank you, Alana. Thank you, the listener, for giving us the time and joining us in this particular episode. Now, just a thought. We talk about the justice system and what's fair in the system, and every now and then I hear complaints that maybe a sentence was inappropriate from folks that were not in the courtroom and actually observe the facts of that particular case that they're talking about. And one of the things that I always talk to folks about, justice is really all perception-based. It's all what your history, what your education, what your experience informs you on. So I'll give you an example. I have had cases where there have been individuals that come forward. They're charged with a crime. They have, let's say, a family member that testifies. They'll come in and they'll say, look, I have a good son. He's a really good young man. He's loving. He's taken care of me. He's a good father, always been kind. Justice really dictates that in this particular case, you grant him probation. And then that person will get off the stand. Another person will come up and they'll say, look, I'm the victim of this crime. Let me tell you how this affected my life. It's really destroyed certain aspects of my peace. And as a result of that, justice really mandates that you sentence this person to prison for a very, very long time. Then you have perceptions everywhere in between. The point that I'm making is justice is based on where your perception comes from. And no two people ever will look at an exact case understand all the facts of that case and think that justice should lie exactly where another person believes. Just the nature of humanity. We're all different people. We all have different thoughts. We all have different frames of mind. So going back to the concept of everything being perception-based, I was in court not too long ago, and I had a gentleman in front of me, and he had a drug case, and his attorney got up, and his attorney wanted me to know his perception. I said, look, Judge, this is a good young man. He's trying drugs. He knows it's bad for him. He is a chef. He loves his profession. He really gets a lot out of working as a chef. And so I'm telling him, continue doing the beautiful things that you do in the kitchen. Do all those things that a good chef does. Get away from these drugs. Move forward. Be a happy, productive person. And so obviously, that piqued my curiosity. Me, someone who loves to eat, someone who loves food, asked the young man, you're a chef? And he said, yes. All right. And he was in custody. I said, where do you work? And he said, well, I don't work. I'm in jail. Okay. I get that part. Where did you work before you got arrested? And he said, Whataburger. Okay. I get that too. So where did you work before you got your job at Whataburger? He said, I've always worked at Whataburger. Then I looked at him and told him, you, sir, are a chef. It's all about his perception. I'm sure he believes, and I'm sure he probably does make the best Whataburger burgers that are out there. If you were to compare everything that's out there, he probably does a great job on those fries. He does a great job on the apple pies and everything else that Whataburger makes. And so that man in his mind is a chef. Now, of course, I was at the time thinking a good restaurant, maybe that's a sit down, Michelin type food. But this young man, Whataburger, allowed him to pursue his craft. And so the point is, everybody has a perception. It's important that we consider everybody's perception, everybody's experience, and everybody's thoughts in the justice system. And I really enjoy communicating with folks in the courtroom that way. Let's get to the episode. Tom Kaiser is a gentleman that we're going to speak to today. Now, I've been wanting to speak to Tom for a while. A real treat for me. Tom is an attorney, almost 50 years in practice as a lawyer. He's got a great history here in the courthouse. Basically today, he has a family and criminal practice. He also does family law mediation. Got his JD in 1974 from St. Mary's University School of Law here in San Antonio, Texas. He's a member of a lot of professional organizations. He also is very active and has been in the San Antonio Bar Association. He's been a president of the association. He's been a president-elect. He's had other types of offices within the association. We can talk about those things. He's presented seminar speeches for lawyers, and been involved with the State Bar of Texas Board of Directors. Basically, this is no hamburger. This is an individual that's been involved in the legal system for a long time and has done really good work. I do have a question for him, though. I haven't seen him in my courtroom in the 379th in quite a while, but we'll get to that. Personally, he has a great family. He has a son that practices with him, and he has lots of grandchildren, 3 children, is married, really into baseball. We get to have nice conversations on baseball. There's a baseball stadium here in San Antonio that's actually named after Tom. He loves to snow ski, pickleball, golf. He travels. He's basically at a good point in his life. Tom, welcome. Tom Kaiser. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes. I know you've been around, and, I just made reference to it. I haven't seen you in the courtroom for a while. Are you purposely avoiding me? Is there something that's going on? Maybe you didn't want to catch the virus?
Thanks, Judge. I actually look forward to being in your courtroom. My son Shane and I have a practice. He joined me a little over 10 years ago. And when he joined me, Judge, he was a former prosecutor here in the Bexar County Courthouse under District Attorney Susan Reed for about 10 years. And then his wife is active duty Army, and they moved to El Paso. And so he worked for the Attorney General's office in El Paso for a couple of years, and he also worked for the JAG office.
Yeah, he was a prosecutor in the 379th with me some years back.
Okay.
We enjoyed having him. He was a really good lawyer.
Thank you. I guess where I was going with that is that when he came back to San Antonio in 2015, I don't think he would mind me sharing this. Initially, it was a pretty closed secret, but his wife is a breast cancer survivor, and it's been in remission for quite a while, but 8 surgeries required him to be a stay-at-home dad. They had 2 little boys when this all happened. And so he thought maybe it would be best to come to work with his dad. And we weren't quite sure how that was going to work out. But he said, I don't want to get all stressed out, Dad, and I'd like you and I to have some type of an agreement that we're only going to have 25, no more than 30 active cases. So when you ask me, where have you been? We usually have about 15 active criminal cases and 15 active family law cases.
Wow.
We give our clients our cell numbers, which sometimes is a mistake. We have to remind them not to blow up our phones. But so we have this boutique practice, and, at first I was thinking it's not going to work. There's not going to be enough money coming in to pay all the bills and take the trips I like to take and spoil the grandkids. But I was wrong about that. So one of the last times I was in your court was a couple of years ago. Or maybe actually I was in your court in the last maybe 6 to 8 months. Not on an active case, but I thought it would be a good idea to bring one of my clients who you sentenced to prison back into the courtroom when he was paroled.
Yes.
A teacher here in town that stood before you probably like 4 years ago when I was in your court on an active case. And this teacher had an alcohol problem. He was also a girls' basketball coach, and a very good one. He was a math teacher and a girls' basketball coach, but he had a drinking problem. In fact, he had 6 prior DWIs when I stood in front of you asking you to grant him probation. And when you said, I can't do that, Tom, in your own nice, kind words, I looked at you somewhat surprised that I didn't get in my way. I said, well, Judge, he's been to treatment. He just got out of lifetime recovery. He's got a sponsor. He's going to AA meetings. And I remember, if I may just be truthful, you were kind enough to probably, lean down and say, Tom, this is number 6 or number 7. There's consequences. And I've got to give him some time. And so I had to accept that. So he went away for a couple of years, was paroled out early, behaved himself in prison. Not safe P, but prison. And when he was released, he came back to see Shane and myself, and we set up a time where he could come over and thank you. Thank you for what you did for him. He needed to have some discipline and take responsibility. He had been enabled far too long. And so I had to share that with your listeners, that even though you and I have been friends in and out of the courtroom, sometimes you have to step up and, honor your oath and protect the community.
Yes.
I'll tell you that same teacher, that math teacher, is now tutoring my 2 grandsons.
Yes.
He has stayed sober, and he's a productive member of the community. He goes to meetings and has a sponsor, and hopefully has turned the corner and can continue to stay sober and stay out of trouble and out of your courtroom.
That's good to hear. Yes. And I'm sure a part of what you do, you're a mentor, and I've seen you do that with your clients. You mentor them, you try to guide them, you almost a therapist, counselor type. That's part of the role of being an attorney, isn't it?
Well, in my case, Judge, as you know, your listeners may not know, thank you for the kind words about my accolades as the past bar president, but your listeners also need to know that there was a time in my life where things were not going so well. You know about that, most of it anyway, or a lot of it. You're talking to a fellow here who really made some bad choices back in the 1980s. You're talking to a fellow, I just wrote an article for the San Antonio Defense magazine, but it hasn't come out yet. But in that article, I say something to the effect, I was a 7th round draft choice by the Baltimore Orioles. I was provided a really good college education. When my baseball career ended, I was a school teacher for a couple of years. I married my college sweetheart. We had 3 beautiful kids, all educated at Mount Sacred Heart.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter went to Incarnate Word, and one of the boys went to Central Catholic. We lived in Oak Hills. We were members of the country club. Had a Porsche in the driveway. The firm I worked for had a condo down at Port Aransas at Channelview.
Mm-hmm.
They had Spurs season tickets, and we were making enough money. My wife was a registered nurse at Methodist Hospital, and I had a job in a law firm at the Tower Life Building where we could take spring trip ski vacations.
Mm-hmm.
So I had all these materialistic things back in the 1970s and early 80s, but fell prey to a pretty bad alcohol, cocaine, meth, and marijuana addiction
Mm-hmm.
that basically kicked my ass. And to the point that in 1984, I was arrested by the FBI and the DEA for cocaine, and saw my life flash in front of me. I had crossed a line and was pretty much out of control. And if I can continue, when you talked about mentoring and being sort of a teacher or working with my clients, I didn't learn a whole lot from that experience. The baseball park you talked about in your opening,
Yes.
yeah, it's true. It's still there. Judge Tom Rickoff presided over my case. There wasn't enough cocaine involved for the feds to. There's about $1,000 worth of cocaine, and they sort of dropped the case. But the DA back then was Sam Millsap, and he wanted to make sure that there were some consequences. So the consequence for me was a 10-year deferred adjudication and build this baseball park out at Old Blanco Park, which is way out Blanco Road, past Camp Bullis, almost to the Comal County line.
Which is on the far north side of San Antonio.
Correct.
Yeah.
And still there today.
Hill country, beautiful country.
Yes.
I bet you it's a beautiful park.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you. Every once in a while, I'll go out there and sit and do a little meditation. So I guess where I'm going with that is that you would think that, getting arrested, getting handcuffed, put into a police car, going to DEA headquarters would have scared me enough to go get some help with that addiction problem. But the truth of the matter is that I was 37, and even Judge Rickoff thought, suggested that I start going to some AA or NA meetings. Go get some help, Tom.
Right.
Go get some help.
And at that time, you were a criminal defense attorney.
Pretty much, and family law.
Mm-hmm.
My first boss in the Tower Life Building, which I can see from your chambers, I was on the 10th floor of that building for 10 years. And my boss was Oliver Hurd. And Oliver Hurd was, at the time, the youngest board-certified attorney in family law and criminal law.
Yeah, he's a big name here.
And
yes.
He taught me how to practice law right before he got into the back tax collection business.
Uh-huh.
And, that's about the time that my addiction was really spiraling out of control. So he was a very good mentor to me. And we were close friends. And I'm godfather to one of his 3 daughters, who I've stayed in touch with over the years. Oliver passed in 2000 after I got sober in 1990, and we became friends all over again. So, but when Judge Rickoff sentenced me and suggested I go get some help, I ignored that and was very stubborn and built the baseball park, but continued to drink and use. And what happened next, just real briefly, is in '86, my wife couldn't put up with all the infidelity issues and the lying and the cheating and the dishonesty that was going on, and filed for divorce. And then 2 years later, in '88, my law practice was pretty well dried up, so I had to file for bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
In 1989, I drowned my sports car.
And it's all related to the substance abuse and the...
All of it. I just needed more and more and more of whatever would make me feel different. I had just a hole in my gut, and never really addressed the underlying issues. Never sought counseling. And on Mother's Day weekend, 1990, my son Mike had come to live with me after the divorce. And I shared a little of this with you before the podcast started, but I was arrested again on Mother's Day weekend, 1990, for writing hot checks.
That was your second arrest?
Second arrest.
Yes.
Handcuffs in front of my son Mike, put into a San Antonio police car, and taken to the Bexar County Jail. He went back to live with his mom. This was May of 1990. What happened next, I got out of jail, went back to live in this house that I was renting off of Hollyhock, out there by Peru and Babcock, in that part of town, not too far from the medical center. Over the summer of 1990, all my utilities got turned off. The water, the air conditioning. My car I drowned my car. So I was using my son's bicycle to go back and forth to this Exxon station at Huebner and Babcock to get some beer. And I was using my next door neighbor's garden hose most of the summer to take showers. And on Sundays, I would go around my neighborhood on Sunday morning and steal their newspapers. Back then, we had two newspapers, the San Antonio Light,
That's right.
the Express News.
That's right.
You may not remember, but they had Lotteria and Wingo cards inside those newspapers, besides the funny papers.
I do remember, yeah.
So I would pull all those out and put them on my living room floor, hoping, like playing bingo, that the numbers matched up. And because I was broke, and my mom, dad, sister, my aunts and uncles, my former wife, completely cut me off, which was good. Kind of like what you did for my client. There's accountability. You have to take responsibility. No more enabling.
And so at this time you were an addict. You were addicted?
Yes.
And so that addiction then fueled these behaviors and.
Yes. Yeah. Kind of like when I talk a little bit, Judge, I compare myself, like being in a boxing ring with Mike Tyson for 10 rounds, the decade of the 80s, getting the shit kicked out of me over and over and over again. Or like Rocky Balboa going over to his corner when Clubber Lang or Apollo Creed is doing a number on his face, and there's a scene there where he talks to his manager, Mick, cut me, Mick, because his eyes are closed, and he wants to get back in there and get some more of that. And so that's where addiction can take you. It takes you to some very dark places. Oftentimes it takes people like myself to prison or institutions, or even worse, the morgue.
Right.
So there's a phrase, locked up, covered up, or sobered up. Those are the choices you have when you get addicted to substance abuse, or the mental health component to it too, the depression that goes along with it.
Right.
Yes. So I'm one of the lucky guys. I also, I'm a baseball guy, so I'm familiar with that speech that Lou Gehrig gave at Yankee Stadium. He was pretty young. He was arguably, one of the greatest baseball players ever. But unfortunately, he came down with an incurable disease.
Right. Which they named after him.
Correct.
Yeah.
But he stood there in front of a sold-out Yankee Stadium crowd on the last day. He had a uniform on and thanked everybody and said out loud, "I'm the luckiest guy in the world."
Right.
Yeah. So some days I feel like that, to get the second chance that I got. Because, as I was struggling back in the summer of 90, an old friend of mine who I used to drink and drug with heard that I was really in bad shape.
Right.
Bad enough, Judge, to where I had a rope hanging down from an indoor basketball court. I had high ceilings at this place I moved into, and there was a time after the divorce and before I really, really hit that proverbial bottom that I, would have these indoor basketball games, these parties at the house, if you will. And but there was no partying going on in the summer of 90, so I would get up on a chair, I'd put the rope around my neck, I just couldn't take the step off the chair. And as broke as I was, I never went to a pawn shop. I had a deer rifle and a shotgun. I liked to deer hunt. I liked to bird hunt. And I would get one or both of those guns out, put it on the couch, put a round in there. I couldn't do that either. And that's when my friend showed up. A couple of people showed up. The constable over there in Leon Valley showed up. That was the precinct I lived in because I was being evicted. And then another friend showed up. The fellow, his name was Richard Arthur. He has since passed, and he wouldn't mind me dropping his name. Came out to my house on, I remember this like it was yesterday, Monday, September 10th, 1990. He said, Tom, why don't you and I go to breakfast? Yeah, I said, okay. Hopped in his car. And then after breakfast, he took me over to an AA meeting at a place called Club 12 off of San Pedro on Thames.
Yeah, and we still use Club 12 today. And if you ever want to get me out of the house, you tell me on a weekend, Ron, let's go get a taco. So that person was very smart. Get you out of the house like that.
Yes, he was.
Yeah.
Saved my life.
Yes.
That very day, I went to the 11 o'clock meeting. I didn't exactly know what was going on in there. I heard just enough, though, that inspired me. I went with Richard after the meeting back to his office. He had a frame shop, a warehouse off of Blanco on Burwood. And he would make frames and sell them to Michael's and other retail stores. So he was a wholesaler. And so one of the first God wink moments, and I call them God wink moments because I don't believe in coincidences. My former wife showed up shortly after I arrived at his office on September 10th, 1990. She showed up because she needed 2 posters framed for our oldest son, Shane, who was going off to University of Texas. She picked that day, that time, to look up Richard to get those 2 posters framed. And so Richard had her come back. And Richard said to Harriet, guess where Tom just came from? And she had no idea. He just came from his first meeting at Alcoholics Anonymous. And from that moment on, she was one of my biggest cheerleaders. She had bought 2 black dresses. She knew I was going to die.
Right.
She didn't know if it was going to be the winter or the summer.
Right.
And so I went back to Club 12 that same day, 5:30. Raised my hand, said, my name's Tom. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, and I'd like one of those Desire chips. A desire not to drink or use for 24 hours. And so I walked up, picked one up, got a hug, and took a seat. And I've been going back to those meetings ever since.
That's a compelling story, and it's meaningful. And I know that you use your experiences in your work as a lawyer, but you're also involved in an organization called the Texas Lawyers Assistance Program. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So what exactly is that program? How was it created? What is your involvement in it?
In the fall of 1990, I am hearing about meetings that only lawyers go to. And that meeting is actually tonight. I've been going to that meeting since 1990. We meet at St. George's at West Avenue and Northwest Military. It's funny, but there's a lot of churches that open up their rooms, side rooms for AA and NA meetings at very little cost. So now I start going to the legal professional meeting. And again, I'm not ashamed of, I'll be careful about name dropping because it is a program of anonymity. But when I was going to Club 12 early on, what helped me get over my ego and my pride and my self-centeredness was one of my law school professors was going to those meetings, and one of our district judges was going to those meetings. And I said to myself, shoot, if those guys can be in here, then you can park your butt in here for an hour, Tom. And it encouraged me. So now I'm being served with these papers. I'm going to the legal professional group. I'm talking out loud about, what do I do? And one of those lawyers volunteered to follow an answer and help navigate a path where turned out I was suspended for 1 year. So
You're suspended from practicing law?
from 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And another date that I remember, Judge, was March 15th, 1991. That's the date that I surrendered my law license. And I've talked enough about my story to where when you lose your law license, you take your bar card out of your back pocket, which I have in my back pocket right now. And if your law license is laminated, like I believe yours is, on the wall over there, you scotch tape your bar card to the back of your law license, and you deliver it to the clerk of the Supreme Court.
That's right. Yes.
And I didn't know any better, but I drove it up there, parked it outside the Supreme Court building, walked it in, and handed it to the clerk of the Supreme Court, and they decide when you get it back. And that lawyer, who was in recovery, he got sober at the age of 62, I might add. The attorney that helped me, he lived to be 80, and during those 18 years, he helped a lot of people, and he sure helped me, because he went on to broker a deal, I guess you would say. And so tempted to drop his name. I'm going to do it because I'm so proud of him and his family. It wouldn't care, but it was Pat Maloney Sr.
Okay.
Pat Maloney Sr. was the Thomas J. Henry or the Jeff Davis of his day. You know,
Exceptionally respected. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and at the age of 62, he surrendered. You know, I read 3 books every morning, and I made a copy, and I think it'd be pertinent to stop there. So this week I read my books every morning, these meditation books, these daily reflection books, if you will. Our great triumph was not, if you bear with me, our great triumph was not because of our victory over alcohol, but because of our complete defeat. It was only when we were beaten to our knees that we sought the only help that could save us. So we came into AA, not as a boastful conqueror, but as cringing and bloody casualties of an unequal fight. We were whipped. We knew it. We gave not a damn who else knew it. For us, it was unconditional surrender. There were and could be no reservations. So Pat Maloney brokered a deal to probate 8 months of that 1 year suspension. So later on, on that weekend, that was a Friday, March 15th, 1991 was a Friday. And that weekend, the lawyers that are in recovery, lawyers concerned for lawyers, that's what we call ourselves in Texas.
Yes.
California has they call themselves the other bar. I call it the Drunk Lawyers Conference every year. In fact, it's coming up. It's the first weekend in June. It's in Austin this year. We rotate San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and Dallas. That year, it was at the Minger Hotel next to the Alamo, right downtown San Antonio. Another Godmic moment.
That's a very nice hotel.
I'm driving back. I'm in a bad mood. I'm depressed. I have just, this kid that grew up in Western Maryland, whose dad never graduated from high school, who dropped out. My dad dropped out of high school in the 10th grade to go into World War II. Came back from the war in one piece, met my mom at a Coast Guard station off in the Great Lakes, married her, and had 2 kids. And they scraped and saved to make sure that myself and my sister went to Catholic schools to get the best education possible. So 12 years of Catholic school, 8 years of St. Patrick's, 4 years at LaSalle. The baseball guy that had a chance to play professional baseball, the school teacher, the golden boy, and here I was, driving back from Austin, thinking of everything my parents had sacrificed for, and look at me now. Just like that reading, beaten.
It's got to be very humbling. Yeah.
So I didn't have any money, but they offered me a scholarship to go to that convention. And that's when I found out about TLAP, Texas Lawyers Assistance Program, started by a guy by the name of Pat Sheeran. And today we have what we call the Sharon Crowley Trust Fund.
I saw that. I went online. I saw that. Yeah.
So thanks to guys like Alan Dubois and a number of our recent past bar presidents, we have been funding that trust fund with chunks of our dues for a really, really good cause. So when lawyers say, what's the bar do for me? I go right there. Because if you're in trouble, like I was, and you raise your hand and say, I need help, we're paying now for residential treatment, for outpatient treatment, for counseling, and we tap into that Sheeran Crowley Trust Fund, no questions asked.
Yeah, online on the website, it says that it serves substance abuse and mental health needs of Texas lawyers, and it's funded solely by lawyers' contributions. And so when you say we fund that, how is it that y'all raise money?
Well, the state bar takes our dues, and it puts chunks of like $250,000 a year, plus this, guys like me and women, this disease does not discriminate, white, black, brown, men, women. There's a club. I still go back to Club 12, and one of the first phrases, it doesn't make a difference how you get here, whether you drank at the White House or the Ice House, whether you have a Rolex or a Timex. Or if you went to school at Yale or you got here from jail. It's these rhymes, but it's true.
The School of Hard Knocks.
Yes. So at that conference that weekend, there were lawyers there who, unlike me, had gotten disbarred. I'm looking at a 1-year suspension that was probated for 8 months. So I had light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
And there's a lot of community. I didn't feel unique, just like I didn't feel unique at Club 12. I'm not feeling unique over at the Menger Hotel on the weekend of March 15th, 1991. That was my introduction to TLAP.
Right.
And so I've been going back to that meeting and being, I've gotten involved with TLAP, over my 35 and a half years of sobriety.
So it was Pat Maloney Sr. who introduced you to TLAP?
Oh, that conference did. Yes. And and Pat would be responsible for that. Pat was very active in TLAP himself.
Yeah. So he gives, there's an award that is named after him that is given every year by the Northwest Democrats here in San Antonio. Northwest Democrats of Bexar County is actually the name of the organization. And it's a really, really big event. It's large. And they name it the Pat Maloney Senior Award Dinner, and they show a video where he speaks. And every year I go and I watch the video, and it's very touching. But part of his story, he does talk about alcoholism. And you're giving me a little frame of reference. And what's interesting to me is that you've followed in his footsteps as it relates to taking your experiences and helping others that are in the same boat that maybe you were in so many years ago. Is that kind of how you see that?
Yes, there's another one of those little catchy phrases. You can't keep it unless you give it away.
Right. And I think that's a lesson that we have here today, right? Is you got to mentor, you got to bring folks along, you got to share your experiences, you got to do what you can to pay it forward and bring others into the fold.
Yes. I mean, what was freely given to me, I need to pass on.
Yes. Yes.
You can't hoard it.
That's one of the messages that I'm getting out of this conversation.
That's true.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever, there are some of the meetings, Judge, at Club 12 are open. Anybody can go.
Yeah. I think I've been to Club 12 as a judge, and with what I do. I mean, I've been in the criminal law business my entire career, really before I became a lawyer, because I used to work with Child Protective Services before I went to law school. So I've gone to a lot of these meetings to sort of get the feel of it, understand it, trying to recognize what it is that we're asking people to do when we tell them to go to these sober support meetings. And so, everyone's different. Every meeting has a different feel depending on who's involved, depending on the location. But Club 12 does have a great reputation.
Thanks. So, yes, and it's still my home group to this day. I go to the legal professional group at St. George's on Thursday nights, but Club 12, is still my home group.
Some of the stuff that I've seen on the TLAP program, they don't just help lawyers, right? And I think that's important for those that are interested in the legal profession to recognize. On the website, it talks about they help law students, young lawyers, aging lawyers. Ageism is an issue. We've seen a lot of our colleagues get older and pass over time. Judges, this is the interesting part to me, legal employers and legal professionals. So it's more open, I think, than just lawyers. Is that right?
It can be. Yes. Yes. We really, so people say, well, why don't you, and I remember early on taking my story, maybe I was a year or two sober. taking it into Central Catholic High School, where my oldest son graduated, but we don't take meetings into high schools.
Right.
You have to be pricked. You have to be beat up. You have to, either get arrested, go through a divorce, go through bankruptcy. Most people are not going to get off the elevator until it falls down to, the basement or sub-level 2 in my case.
Right.
So
it's got to be clear that there's a problem.
yes. So we really encourage, law students. There's so much drinking that goes on during law school. We encourage, the deans at the various law schools throughout the state to advertise, if you will, about TLAP and the meeting at St. George on Thursday nights. And so to answer your question, we do open it up as wide as we can. But anonymity is such and the confidentiality, and there's an umbrella. We have to try to explain in the article that I just wrote, we're not the grievance committee. We're here to help you.
Right.
We want you to get better. Another silly phrase, we're not necessarily bad people trying to be good. We're sick people that need to get well.
Right. Right. There's some statistics. Now, generally speaking, there are other issues at TLAP, right? So 53% of those that get arrested in the system, in a felony court, nationwide, these are statistics that I've read, there's an underlying cause of those issues that relate to drug addiction and a mental health diagnosis. And so some of the statistics that I've seen here, 32% of lawyers 30 years old or younger have a drinking problem. So the question there is, what exactly does it mean to have a drinking problem? That's a third of lawyers, 32%, 30 years of age or younger. 28% of lawyers struggle with some level of depression. 19% of lawyers demonstrate symptoms of anxiety. 11% of lawyers have had suicidal thoughts at some point in their careers. And so how does that translate across the board? How does that compare with folks at large in the general population? Is there higher incidences of suicidal thoughts and alcohol issues and depression that exists with practicing lawyers? Or is that sort of kind of across the board, it mirrors what we see in society in general? Well,
the quick answer is that I think statistically our profession has double the rate. I think the general population out there is about 10%.
Right.
From my experience and studies and going to a lot of conferences in state and out of state.
It's a high stress job.
It is. And so were we alcoholic before we went to law school, or is the stress of, win at all costs? Does that trigger there's still, they've taken twins, adopted people. I mean, there's still doing a lot of studies. So another stat, half the people in this country drink just fine.
Yes. They can drink.
A third don't drink at all. Age and religion.
And that's kind of going down, right? Those statistics are with the younger folk coming in. And
so that leaves, well, wait a second, Tom, that's 50%, and then another, third, so that leaves what, 17, 18%. And some of those people, Judge, can binge drink on the weekends. I mean, this getting off the topic just a little bit, but they can binge drink on the weekends. They put it down Sunday night after that last NFL game. They go to bed, they get up the next day, they go to work. They don't mistreat their spouses. And they can repeat that behavior a couple times a month and get away with it.
Right.
That's that control issue. But the true alcoholic can't control it anymore. I was blessed, another God wink moment. I was visiting a friend of mine who was an inpatient resident up at Starlight Treatment Center up in Center Point, Texas, just outside Comfort.
Yeah.
And back in those days, in the 90s, when I got sober, that place was run by a fellow by the name of Dr. Gene Seal. And I walked in when he was giving a lecture to a group of new patients. And he was wagging his finger, which I thought was maybe a little rude, but he was trying to get a message across. And the message that I heard him say was those of us that have this problem can't have one of anything
Right.
without it triggering a monster. Because I found out on my 60th day, so I pick up a Desire chip at 5:30 on September 10th, 1990. I put it in my pocket.
Mhm.
I keep it dry. My parents were so proud of me, they sent me an airplane ticket to come back to Maryland for my 30-day chip.
Mhm.
So I fly back to Baltimore, and they pick me up at the airport. And my hometown is about 2.5 hours away, up in the western part of Maryland, a little town called Cumberland, sandwiched between Morgantown, West Virginia, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, one of the last little towns in western Maryland. And that's where I grew up.
Mhm.
And so my mom and dad don't have a drinking problem. They didn't seem to have any mental health problems. My sister doesn't have a drinking problem or any mental health problems, but obviously I had a big problem with alcohol and drugs, and some depression along the way. So Dad had bought a 6-pack of non-alcoholic beer. So bear with me for a minute. I'll tie this in about not having one of anything that Dr. Seal was relaying to his a new class of patients at Starlight Hospital, and because my dad was really, really good at making shrimp, boiled shrimp, Chesapeake Bay style shrimp, and my mom was really, really good at making crab cakes.
It's making me hungry.
Fortunately, they've passed those recipes onto me, and I've gotten pretty good at doing that. But the truth of the matter was, I was afraid of the non-alcoholic beer, so it was down in the basement icebox. And I left it alone. I found a meeting in Cumberland called Fort Recovery, and I was going to meetings every day. And I went back out to my junior college where I was drafted by the Orioles and reconnected with the baseball program out there. I was making good decisions and staying sober in early sobriety. On the 60th day, I went to a meeting, of all places, where I went to elementary school, St. Patrick's, on a Saturday, on November 10th, 1990, and raised my hand and got a 60-day chip. And that night, an old friend of mine came over to the house that I used to party with. And right before Saturday Night Live was coming on, he asked to go out in the backyard. He rolled up a joint, innocent enough. All the coke I did and all the meth I did and the Valium I swallowed and the alcohol that I drank, the thought crossed my mind that maybe I could smoke a little weed and get away with it. And if I did that, maybe I could go in that icebox and open up that 6-pack of non-alcoholic beer. And my friend Paul handed that joint to me, and the first time he handed it to me, I said no. And the second time he handed it to me, I took it and smoked some of it. And the next thing I knew, I was drinking all those 6 beers and watched what I could of Saturday Night Live. And the next day, November 11th, 1990, was a Sunday, and I mentioned it to one of the fellows that was going to Fort Recovery, the AA meeting. His name was Harry the Hat. He wore different hats to different AA meetings. I said, Harry, what do I do about this? I felt terrible. One of the most vicious things about addiction in this disease, the American Medical Association, by the way, came out in 1955, 20 years after AA was founded by Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. They came out in 1955, they meaning the American Medical Association, and said that alcoholism and drug addiction is a chronic, progressive, and oftentimes fatal disease. So when I started hearing that at the meetings, that kind of helped me. I didn't know I had a disease. It's the kind you can't scrape off your hand and look under a microscope and say, you have it. So Harry the Hat tells me, Tom, you know, even though you didn't know there was a little bit of alcohol in the non-alcoholic beer, you can't have 2 sobriety days, one for alcohol, one for drugs. You need to give that 60-day chip up, brother.
Yes.
There's a meeting tonight down at St. Mary's.
Yes.
You need to go down there and give up that 60-day chip and pick up a new Desire chip and change your sobriety date from September 10th to November 11th.
And I've seen that, right? I've seen where folks, just one little tiny sip of something and the whole thing will be the next thing you know, they're either going to get arrested or they're going to get in the hospital or something. And
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen it too. It's scary.
Yes.
A glass of wine at Thanksgiving after 17 years. A good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Couldn't quite get back into the rooms.
Right.
A very prominent person here in town.
Mm-hmm.
But then on the other side of that coin, you get guys like, Red McCombs, who held his, he was pretty modest. He donated a lot of money. There's some really heavy hitters in our community that have kept their sobriety and their anonymity pretty close to the chest, but they're very generous with their pocketbook, trying to help the recovery community here, and Red McCombs being one of them. We have a treatment center here on Southton Road, Lifetime Recovery, that a lot of people have helped build over the years.
Yes.
For blue collar people that don't have a lot of money to go to the fancy places that only take insurance or cost $30,000 out of pocket. So the lesson I learned, Judge, is that, just like I heard Dr. Seal say 2 years later, I found out the hard way, but it was a good lesson at the right time.
Mm-hmm.
I can't smoke weed.
Yeah.
Whether it's trying to play baseball or going on a ski trip or, whatever. No. I'm one of those guys that can't have one of anything.
Right. And those are the folks that we see in the justice system, the professionals that we see in the system, right? So, we do have a high stress type job. First of all, for me, I'm very fortunate. I feel very lucky to have this job. I'm consistently being reminded of how blessed I am to represent Bexar County, to represent the state as a state district judge. This is my 18th year. I'm really enjoying it. I've made some life decisions in the last 6 months, I think, that have really enhanced my own professional and personal lives. But something about being a lawyer, right? People were coming in. I remember practicing law. People were coming in, and you're carrying their stress. They're coming into you at the most difficult times of their life. So you're carrying all the stuff that they are carrying, and you're trying to help them with that. And you can't help it. There's going to be a little imprint on you. There's going to be a part of that stress that is implanted in your heart, in your soul. What is it about the environment? Is it the fact that we have deadlines? We got these court settings. Clients are expecting more than sometimes an attorney could deliver. There's a lot of high stakes outcomes. You're dealing with folks' lives. You're dealing with consequences that really affect folks. What is it about our profession that makes those rates double than what regular society would see them as a whole?
So I'm listening to that, trying to figure out the best response.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps sharing with you a case that Shane and I had in Comal County recently.
Which I hear, I haven't practiced in Comal obviously in a very long time, but I hear it's a tough jurisdiction.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's a nice way to put it.
That's putting it mildly, huh?
So we represented a fellow.
It's a suburban area here in Bexar County.
Yeah, yes.
Yes, which a lot of times in most urban areas, the suburbs tend to be tough.
Kendall County can be harsh too.
Yes, yes.
So our client was 11 years old.
Oh, wow.
When he was playing doctor with his 7-year-old female cousin.
And 11 can be charged with a crime as a juvenile.
2 years later, they knocked on his door.
Yeah.
And 2 years after that, when he was 15, they charged him as an adult.
So they certified him.
Yes.
Yes.
Put him on probation for 10 years. Made him register as a sex offender.
Is it a lifetime?
No,
for him?
But the way the Sex Registration Act is, it extends 10 years after you get off probation.
Right.
So from 15 to 25, he's registered, and then from 25 to 35, he's got to register.
Right. Right.
And in this young man's case, when he was in high school, he and some other buddies got picked up again in Comal County for some alleged marijuana possession. Turned out to be synthetic marijuana. The case was dismissed. Mm-hmm. But for reasons unknown to me, because I was not representing him when he was 11 or 13 or 15 or in high school,
right.
They tacked on 3 additional years to his registration. So instead of getting off at the age of 35, he doesn't get off until the age of 38.
Mm-hmm. Which is basically his entire young adult life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
He's married now. He's got a child. He's in the landscaping business.
Mm-hmm.
Done well. Stayed out of trouble.
Good.
About a year or two ago, let's say 2 years ago, because they're pretty slow up there, backlog, the license plates on the back of his trailer that he has his lawnmower equipment and weed eater and his gas cans, both license plates got banged up where you couldn't read them.
Mm-hmm.
He took those license plates off and he went and got a new pair of license plates to the Department of Motor Vehicles. But he didn't tell anybody about it.
Right.
And that's a violation of the Sex Registration Act.
Right.
So once again, they came out to his house and they arrest him.
And not another charge him with a failure to register, which is a
which is a state jail felony.
Yes. Well, the first one is subsequent to those that goes up.
So yes, you've had to. So I'm saying, he's due to get off next March.
What's his age now?
He's 36.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, I stopped and think he was born in 89, 11. Yes, or 37.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he would get off at 38. So he's 37. He's born in 89. So he's due to get off next March. And trying to reason with the prosecutors, like, wait a second. And then hearing comments like, well, there's probably kids in those houses where he's cutting the grass.
Mm-hmm. I hear those types of arguments, yeah.
And it's hard to maintain. I mean, you want to get into a almost like a verbal confrontation sometimes. You want to get in, you want justice. They take the same oath, the prosecutors take the same oath as we take.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I shake my head and, we're just looking for, why don't we make it like a $1,000 contribution to your food bank up here and we'll call it a day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, right in the intro. Everybody's perception of justice is very different.
So when you get cases like that, remember, Shane and I we only have 30 active cases.
You got that boutique.
And you're right.
Let's kind of go back to the TLAP issues, the addiction and the mental health stuff.
Okay.
In terms of diagnoses. So I can imagine being a lawyer. Let's pretend, or let's say that there's an attorney out there that has some sort of mental health diagnosis that is really affecting their practice. It's affecting their work, affecting their representation of clients, or there's some sort of drug or alcohol addiction issue that they're dealing with. I can imagine it would be difficult, right? They'll be hesitant to come forward and put their name out there and say, hey, I need help through the TLAP program, the Texas Lawyers Assistance Program. What are some of the stigmas in the profession that you experienced? I can imagine, right? Your reputation, your credibility is important in the profession. I'm sure there's a fear that you could lose some sort of credibility as it relates to your colleagues and the judges, losing your license. What kind of experience do you have, do you think, or that you think lawyers go through as it relates to why they wouldn't want to come forward and sort of say, hey, I need help?
Well, you mentioned the word stigma, and that stigma is wearing off a little bit in a good way.
Yeah, and I do see that. I do agree.
When you have professional athletes, professional entertainers, Bradley Cooper and Brad Pitt and some other.
They kind of come out.
Yeah, they came out. Kind of like Kaiser, myself came out. I came out, and I put together a homemade video back in 2010 and started showing it to the Bar Association. I named it Career Killers. So that stigma that you mentioned is, for some of us, it's like, being an alcoholic and a drug addict in 2026, obviously, it's not the same, the perspective you mentioned more than once, as it was back in 1935 when Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob are trying to get a group together to try to figure this thing out, because mental institutions and doctors couldn't figure it out. And we were just the guys with the stigma, the brown paper bag underneath the bridge. Alcoholism can happen to anybody, professionals and non-professionals alike. But try to answer your question, I've gotten a call this week. I probably get at least 2 or 3 calls a month from the spouses or a law partner. What do I do?
Right.
And so, if you call TLAP, there's an umbrella, a literal umbrella of protection, of anonymity, where you can't pierce that. We try to really be protective, and we try to find out if they're ready to. I'll meet somebody at a Starbucks or a coffee shop and let them share my experience, strength, and hope. Mm-hmm. Let them know about the Sharon Crowley Trust Fund if money is an issue.
Yeah.
Let them know it's a dead-end street. Tell them what happened to me.
So you kind of call them up and say, "Hey, I've been through this. I got a communication from somebody that cares for you,
yes,
or that your issues are affecting personally,
yes.
And so let's get together. And then so you share your experiences with them, and then as a result of that, you're starting to try to bring folks into the fold.
Yes,
maybe
invite them to meet me at Club 12 or go to a meeting. Not, you got to be tactful.
Invite them for a taco.
Or taco. That's right. Take them to breakfast.
Absolutely.
No one ever pushed me or told me what to do, or the meetings are free. They pass a basket around, and if you got some change or a buck, you drop it in. If you don't, that's fine too. No judgment.
And the purpose of that is to get coffee, to get some sort of snack,
to keep the electric on,
to pay the bills, to pay for the facility.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. That's what that's all about.
Right.
And I mean, they have a couple of fundraisers throughout the year,
mm-hmm.
Golf tournaments, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But we're self-supporting.
Yeah.
We decline outside contributions. There's some exceptions to that.
Of course. I mean, it's an important endeavor, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was a lady that passed away. It's all public record. Mm-hmm. This is almost 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm only 5-6 years sober. And a situation came on my desk I didn't know what to do with, because we have these steps and these principles. But there was a lady that passed away here in town by the name of Marguerite Wurzbach.
I remember, yeah.
She left an estate over $16 million.
Yeah.
And she left 10% of that estate to her nephew, Conrad Mickle, mm-hmm. who sobered up when I did at Club 12. I knew him a little bit. And her will said that if my nephew passes away before I do, and that's what happened, then his 10% should go to Alcoholics Anonymous of San Antonio. Mm-hmm. Well, there is no such thing as Alcoholics Anonymous of San Antonio. So what the lawyer did for Marguerite Wurzbach's estate, Pat Pate, uh-huh. he sent the paperwork over to our central service office. So stay with me for a minute. Uh-huh. I just represented somebody in that central service office, and they sent the paperwork to me. Mm-hmm. There was about $1.2 million after taxes involved. Mm-hmm. And so the heirs wanted that, and I felt that Marguerite Wurzbach wanted the recovery community to have it. Mm-hmm. So I went out and found an attorney to represent Lifetime Recovery, San Antonio Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse, the Alpha House, and back then, Monsignor Brosnan was still representing the Patrician Movement. Mm-hmm. Remember that?
Yes.
And I represented Club 12, and we went after the money.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of the old adage, right? I mean, I talk to students about this, where they have this belief, right? Some of the students come in, and initially, in the beginning of my classes, and they'll talk about the Constitution, they'll talk about the language, we talk about originalism. Do you believe that the Constitution is written to mean what it says? Or is it a living type Constitution, or it's supposed to develop over time to match society's needs? And what does this really mean? And I give a story where I'm dining with at that time. I mean, back in the day when my wife was alive, I'm dining in a restaurant. Her family would come visit from Corpus. She was from the Corpus area. And Scalia had passed away, Justice Scalia, the Supreme Court, and he was known to be an originalist, one of these folks that believed that we should follow the Constitution as written, black letter type law. She was telling me that Justice Scalia is really the one of the Supreme Court justices who believed in following the words of the Constitution. And I told her, well, actually, I think they all kind of believe that they follow the words of the Constitution. So we had this discussion. And as we're walking out, of course, I'm the one who's going to pay the bill. They think I made all the money. And so I'm walking out, and above the cashier sign was that notice that says, restrooms are for paying customers only. And I said, you're not paying. So you don't have the ability to use the facilities if you need to go. And it's the same argument that you're making here, right? When she said the San Antonio's Alcohol Anonymous, is that what that is?
Alcoholics Anonymous of San Antonio.
Right. And so what does that mean? Does she mean no? only the Alcoholics Anonymous of San Antonio can receive this money, or is she saying the purpose of this money is to serve those types of needs?
So another God wink moment. About the time that I have this document on my desk, maybe I just do family law and criminal law, and I'm average in those areas. I'm not one of them.
You're modest. You're being modest.
So no, well, I didn't. So one of the law partners walks by at the office where I work.
Yes.
Jim Martin. I work at Martin and Drought.
Mm-hmm.
Been over there for 30 years. It's another God wink moment. He says, you need to look up something called the Cypre Doctrine. So what the Cypre Doctrine says, Judge, is that if I leave $10,000 in my will to goodwill, and when I pass, there is no such thing as goodwill. Mm-hmm. But the intent was, and that's where you were going. Mm-hmm. The intent was to leave it to a good nonprofit charity. So when Marguerite Wurzbach wanted the money to go to Alcoholics Anonymous of San Antonio, that the Cypre Doctrine allowed us to contest that and try to divvy up that $1.2 million to the recovery community here in San Antonio, despite what the heirs were saying, that it should go back into the estate and be divided between the heirs. So it ended up in Polly Jackson Spencer's court.
Yes, I remember.
And it turned out well for the recovery community.
Yeah, yes. Good. That's as it should be, right? We talked a little bit about how society has changed and the way we look at these issues differs over time. I think currently we're in this part of our, the pendulum swings, right? Sometimes we're more tough, we're tougher on certain issues. And then over time we start looking at other different types of issues. And somewhere in the middle is always justice is the idea. We're more in a rehabilitative type culture today, I think still, than we were some years back. And so is that something that you think helps the TLAP program, or do you feel like maybe we're not quite where we should be as it relates to being open-minded to folks that need some assistance, some help in the legal profession?
We've made some progress. Mm-hmm. We've made some. Mm-hmm. When I was a senior at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, mm-hmm. My social studies or sociology teacher, we took a road trip, and it was Marion Penitentiary, mm-hmm. about an hour or so away.
Yes.
At the time, maybe the number one, the toughest federal prison there was. And I remember sitting there in a room and waiting on some prisoners to come in, because it was going to be a Q&A time for these college seniors to find out what prison life was all about. And this was 1968, 69, mm-hmm. At the height of Vietnam War.
Yeah.
I look back here in your office, Judge, and I see I have also, you and I have a lot in common. Mm-hmm. I have 3 pictures in my home, one of Martin Luther King that you have behind you.
Yes.
And one of John Kennedy and one of his brother,
yes.
Bobby.
Yes.
So a lot of stuff was going on in our country back then, but here I'm sitting at Marion Penitentiary and I'm listening to guys that are talking about, when you mentioned rehabilitation, these guys were making license plates and making laundry. Mm-hmm. There was no rehabilitation going on.
Right.
It was lock them up and throw away the key attitude. So when you bring up the word rehabilitation, we've made some progress, but it's been baby steps. If you go out to the Dominguez prison at Highway 90 at 1604, one of the things you're going to see when you walk into the lobby is a map of Texas. Mm-hmm. And on that map, Judge, there's 106 stick pins. Mm-hmm. Each one of those stick pins represents a prison in Texas. 106 prisons we have.
Yeah. We are definitely in the age of mass incarceration.
So, rehabilitation, there's been some compassion and some more tolerance and more understanding. We're giving people like Tom Kaiser second and sometimes third chances if we see that they're really. We have these specialty courts now that you and Judge Glenn and others. Judge Alonzo started it with the DWI court. Right. There's been progress.
Right.
But there's so much more we can do. You mentioned a stat a little while ago of 53% of the people that are locked up or incarcerated may be struggling with an alcohol, substance abuse, or a mental health problem. I think it's probably higher.
Right. Well, incarcerated, yeah, that would be higher.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the number of arrests.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, which is high, over 50% of those, right? That's huge.
Yes.
And there's this perception, right? So we recognize people commit crimes, and certain crimes are positive law crimes, which basically means are crimes because we say they're crimes, like, let's say, a drug possession, a low-level drug possession, nobody that's trying to sell or anything like that. But we call them crimes, therefore they're tagged as criminals. And there has to be a balance, right? You gotta make sure folks are accountable for their behavior, but at the same time, we're all human. Everybody makes mistakes, right? One of my favorite biblical quotes, all of us have fallen short of the glory of God. Nobody is perfect, right? Nobody lives life every single day as Jesus did, right? And so as a result of that, I think we need to have compassion for folks. We need to see where we can make folks' lives better. We know these statistics that exist out there, something like, someone whose parent has been incarcerated for a year, while they're under the age of 18, and they're in that bottom quintile, the lowest fifth of the socioeconomic strata in society, have a significantly much more difficult time. Something like 80 plus percent that they'll never get out of the poverty level, versus somebody who does not have that parent that's been incarcerated. They have a much, much higher rate of getting out of that level. We know that there's a generational effect. We know that it relates to poverty. We know that it relates to minority issues. It relates to parts of the community that don't have that support, maybe, that where folks don't get up in the morning and feel great about the world in and of itself. So we need to balance those kinds of things, right? We can't just think of, if we incarcerate folks, the crime rate goes down in the short term, therefore we're better off, because in the long term, that's causing crime rates to increase. It's causing poverty to increase. It's causing problems in our society beyond that. And so things like the Texas Lawyers Assistance Program are significant. It's important that we focus and we put money into these types of programs to make those that are involved in the system better, to help others in a more effective way.
No question about that. There's a part of me that wants to drift into probably get off topic, and I need to stay on topic, because generally speaking, there seems to be a movement in this country where we seem to be going backwards in lots of areas where we thought we were making some progress, but getting back to TLAP and having guys like me that are active in their addiction being loose cannons, taking people's money and not representing them and not doing them the job that I was hired to do, and that's what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And shame on me. And there needed to be consequences, like getting served with those disbarment papers, and we have seen it even more recently here with one of our own peers, with without making judgment, but we had a lawyer here in town by the name of Chris Pettit, and who was
he was sentenced to federal prison for a very long time.
Yes,
but then there was some appeal that happened. I'm not familiar with the appeal.
Yes, there was an appeal. Judge Orlando Garcia sentenced him to some 50-some years, and he appealed that under a theory that he was not apprised that was on the table. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know whether he'll get a new trial or a new sentencing, but in that particular case, you have a guy with a law license that was taking large sums of money from people's savings and trust funds and using it for his own self-serving interest. And
yes.
It hurt a lot of people. And so we TLAP, the bar has a responsibility to the public that lawyers need to help people and not hurt people, and so for the last 35 years or so, take out COVID, during the COVID period, we didn't have our annual meeting, but that Lawyers Concerned for Lawyers, Texas Lawyers Assistance Program. We have arguably, one of the best programs in the country for peer assistance help. All the law schools know about it. All the deans know about it. The incoming first-year law students it's part of the orientation program. The bar is here to help. And so going back, you used the word stigma, and it comes out in my article here in the next couple of weeks that, not to be confused, we're not the grievance committee.
Right. That's important, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're not going to lose your license if you contact TLAP.
Correct.
Right. Or you're not going to get disciplined. Thank you for that message. And you've done a lot of good in your life. My dad was one of those people that he wasn't around a lot when I was young for a certain period of time. He wasn't around a lot, but there was a certain period of time where he was incapable of being around us. He was ill. He was disabled, hospitalized in other locales, had some major serious health issues. And I think he felt guilty for that. I was young, 12 really, when that kind of stuff started happening dramatically in my household, and it did cause some stressors in my young life. But he basically spent the rest of his life trying to make it up to us, trying to make it up to society, trying to be a good man to my mom, his wife, and so Tom, I kind of see you in that same vein. You've had your experiences, but you go out of your way, I think, in a positive way, to make sure that you pass that along. And I'm grateful. I'm sure a lot of folks in the legal profession are grateful. So thank you for that, Tom. We've reached the end of our time. I've enjoyed our conversation. You got an incredible story. Any last words that you have?
Thanks for the opportunity. I don't want the audience to think that I've done everything right in sobriety. I've made some mistakes in sobriety. If you go to an AA meeting, they read a passage at every meeting. It's called How It Works. It's out of our big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the very first paragraph of that How It Works, Judge, is the word honesty. It appears 3 times, and that's a key. It's a key to life. Something we learned as young children that was passed along about being honest about stuff and owning your mistakes and promptly admitting when you're wrong. So, when you make mistakes in sobriety, you can't blame the alcohol and the drugs. That's on me.
Right.
So I'm still a work in progress in some respects, Judge, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I'm still trying to make up for some lost time with my 3 adult children, and I'm trying to do everything I can to spoil those 7 grandchildren. And I'm grateful for the second chance I got when my friend Richard came out to my house on September 10th, 1990, and took me into a meeting at Alcoholics Anonymous.
Well, we all make mistakes. And, I think the important part is a lot of folks that sometimes are deemed or tagged as not being honest. There is a defense mechanism. Sometimes they don't recognize they're being honest. So there's a real strength that comes along with recognizing what being honest means, right? And there's a real maturity that comes along with always focusing on attaining that. And as I told my dad, I'm telling you too, I mean, I know you have a lot of life left, clearly, but, you've done good. And so please continue the good work that you're doing. I know that mental health and substance abuse issues are widespread in our society and in the profession. These are not isolated incidences. These are things that we need to come forward and talk about if they're affecting others, especially if they're affecting our profession. And so just sort of, a last little statement here. The Texas Lawyers Assistance Program is a strictly confidential program. You can call or text them 1-800-343-TLAP or 8527 again, 1-800-343-TLAP, 8527. Call or text if you need help with substance abuse, use, or other mental health issues. They're there to help. And so thank you, Tom. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome, Judge. Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you, listeners. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.